We do not accept scrap donations at a restricted pier, sir. Lieutenant Jason Reed held the rusted brass key over a gray disposal bin beside checkpoint 2. The old man across from him did not raise his voice. He did not reach for the lieutenant's wrist. He simply placed one weathered hand across the open mouth of the bin. That key has already been buried once, he said. The movement was slow, but it stopped everyone within earshot. Behind them, the black hull of the USS Resolute rested against the pier beneath a cold Virginia sky. Mooring lines tightened and groaned. Gulls circled above the harbor. Sailors moved stores, checked fittings, and carried final documents aboard. The submarine was scheduled to deploy before sunrise the next morning, and every minute on the pier had a purpose. Walter Mercer looked like the only man there who was in no hurry. He was 86, narrow through the shoulders, with white hair beneath a faded navy blue cap. The cap carried no rank, no warfare pin, and no unit name. His coat had been brushed clean, but the cuffs were worn. His shoes were polished over leather that had cracked with age. The oilcloth envelope on the security table looked almost as old as he did. Reed lowered the key, but he did not return it. "This is not a museum receiving desk," he said. "You cannot walk onto an operational pier with an unregistered metal object and ask to see the commanding officer. I asked for 2 minutes, and you were told Captain Whitmore is unavailable." Walter's eyes shifted past Reed toward the Resolute. Somewhere inside the boat, a pump started. The vibration traveled through the steel brow and into the pier. It ran for 7 seconds, stopped, and returned 11 seconds later. Walter tilted his head. Reed noticed the movement and mistook it for confusion. "Sir, look at me when I am speaking to you. Your portside auxiliary pump is cycling too fast." Reed stared at him. Walter listened through another cycle. 7 seconds on. 11 seconds off. "The pressure switch is answering late." A young sailor standing beside the checkpoint glanced toward the submarine. His name tape read Collins. Reed set the key on the table. "Engineering completed the auxiliary checks 30 minutes ago. Then they cleared the indicator," Walter said. "They did not clear the pump." Seaman Collins stopped writing. Reed saw it. "Do not encourage him, Collins." "Yes, Lieutenant." Walter looked at Collins. "First deployment?" Collins hesitated. "Yes, sir." Reed stepped between them. "He is not a sir in this context. He is an unauthorized visitor." Walter accepted the correction without expression. Another pump cycle passed beneath their feet. 7 seconds. Then silence. Walter looked back at the boat. "She is breathing shallow." Reed pulled the oilcloth envelope toward himself. "A submarine does not breathe, Mr. Mercer. Every boat breathes." Walter's voice remained quiet. "You only notice after you have depended on one for air." Reed checked Walter's documents a second time. The visitor slip had been issued at the main gate through the Submarine Heritage Foundation. It permitted Walter to enter the visitor center and administrative area, but it did not authorize access to the secure pier. A handwritten notation referred to the Whitmore estate, yet no escort had been assigned and no appointment appeared on the deployment day manifest. Walter's veteran identification card had expired 6 years earlier. Reed held it beneath the checkpoint light. "This is no longer valid." "I know. Then why did you present it?" "The date expired," Walter said. "The name did not." Reed entered the name into the terminal. Walter Elias Mercer. The screen returned no active clearance, no appointment, and no current service connection. Reed turned the monitor slightly toward him. "You are not in the system." Walter barely looked at it. "I have been absent from many systems for a long time." Collins lowered his eyes. Reed had been standing watch since for that morning. He had a deployment checklist behind schedule, 2 delivery trucks waiting at the south gate, and a security supervisor demanding that no unscheduled visitor reach the brow. Walter was not helping himself. "You came through the main gate on a Heritage Visitor Pass," Reed said. "That does not permit you to approach an active submarine." "I did not approach the submarine. I approached your checkpoint." "You asked for the captain." "Yes." "You carried an undeclared object." "I declared it when I placed it on your table." Reed pressed his lips together. The old man was not argumentative. That made the exchange more difficult. He answered each question precisely, without giving Reed the emotional reaction that would justify ending the conversation. Reed opened the oilcloth. The key was nearly 5 inches long. Its rounded head had darkened almost black. Green corrosion marked the edges. Rust filled the narrow cuts between its teeth. This has not opened anything in decades. It opened enough. What is that supposed to mean? Walter did not answer. Reed picked up the checkpoint telephone. This is Lieutenant Reed at checkpoint 2. I have an unscheduled visitor without pier authorization. Send 2 security personnel. Collins looked up. Lieutenant, he has not tried to cross the line. He has been directed to leave. Walter folded his expired card back into a leather wallet repaired with dark thread. I asked you to let Captain Whitmore know I was here, and I told you no. Then I am waiting for someone who understands why that answer is a mistake. Reed covered the receiver. You are making this more difficult for yourself. Walter rested both hands beside the key. No, Lieutenant. I am trying to keep you from making it more difficult for everyone else. The wind lifted one corner of the oilcloth. A narrow band of metal showed beneath the corrosion. Collins leaned closer. There were words beneath the rust. Hawthorne, aft control. The young sailor's face changed. Lieutenant, he said, may I see that? Reed ended the call, but kept his hand on the telephone. For what reason? I have seen that marking. Walter looked at Collins with new attention. Reed turned the key toward the pale morning light. Collins stepped closer. There is a display at the Submarine Learning Center, he said, near the sonar classrooms. It has the Hawthorne crest and a photograph of a key that looks exactly like this. Reed studied the object. It is an old key. The case is empty, Collins said. There is a brass plate underneath it. What does the plate say? Collins swallowed. Return when the last man comes home. The harbor wind moved through the checkpoint. For the first time that morning, Walter looked tired. Not weak. Distant. Reed noticed the change. Who was the last man? Collins asked. Walter looked toward the Resolute. Robert Whitmore. Collins went still. Reed frowned. Whitmore. Captain Daniel Whitmore's father, Collins said. Walter nodded once. Robert died 3 days ago. Reed stared at him. How did you know Captain Whitmore's father? We served on the same boat. Reed looked down at the key again. And this belonged to him. No, Walter placed a finger beside the words AFT control. It belonged to the compartment that decided whether 31 men would see daylight again. Collins forgot the security line. Reed forgot the trucks at the south gate. For several seconds, the only sound was the slap of cold water against the pilings. What happened aboard the Hawthorne? Collins asked. Walter's thumb moved over the pale scar crossing the back of his right hand. The sharp smell of salt and diesel on the pier faded. In its place came scorched insulation, hot wiring, cold steel. A warning bell sounded from a place more than half a century away. The boat went down, Walter said. The key was the only thing that still listened. The USS Hawthorne was deep in the North Atlantic during the winter of 1969 when the first electrical failure struck. Walter was 29 then, a machinist's mate second class with strong hands and a reputation for hearing problems before gauges admitted they existed. The Hawthorne was old, loud, and unforgiving. She carried systems installed by men who trusted brass, steel, and leverage more than electronics. Walter knew every valve in the aft machinery spaces. He knew which pipes clicked when they warmed and which bearings developed a faint pulse before they failed. He also knew that no boat made the sound the Hawthorne made that morning unless something had gone terribly wrong. The warning bell repeated through the passageways. Emergency lights changed the interior to red. The deck tilted beneath his boots. A battery casualty had taken main power and damaged control circuits to the ballast system. The submarine continued descending, heavy and nearly blind. Depth reports moved from compartment to compartment in controlled voices. No one shouted. On a submarine, panic consumed the same air everyone needed to survive. Chief Robert Whitmore appeared at the aft passageway. The control room cannot fire the reserve air, he said. The manual cabinet is locked. Walter reached beneath his work shirt. The brass key hung from a cord around his neck. The captain had assigned it to him 3 weeks earlier because the manual reserve system was obsolete and temperamental. You know the old machinery, the captain had said. Keep it where the ocean cannot take it from you. Walter pushed the key into the lock. It turned with one hard click. Inside the cabinet, gauges trembled beneath the red light. One pressure needle had fallen almost to zero. The manual release lever refused to move. Robert watched the depth repeater above the hatch. We are running out of room. Stop watching the number, Walter said. Watch the pressure. He worked a small wrench behind the lever assembly. The contact had shifted less than half an inch. but that was enough to keep the locking mechanism from engaging. Walter reset it by touch while condensation ran down the bulkhead. The Hawthorne groaned. It was not a crack. It was steel warning the men inside that the ocean had begun testing every seam. Walter braced one shoulder against the cabinet and pulled. The lever moved. Compressed air thundered into the ballast system. The deck shuddered. Somewhere forward, water began forcing out of the tanks. For 1 second, the pressure needle rose. Then the contact slipped again. The lever slammed backward and nearly tore Walter's hands loose. He grabbed it with both arms. "Go forward," he told Robert. Robert looked at the damaged linkage. "It has to be held manually." "Yes. You will be trapped on this side when they seal the bulkhead." Water had begun spreading across the deck from a ruptured fitting. Smoke drifted from the damaged electrical passage behind them. Walter tightened his grip. "Then make sure they seal it." Robert did not move. "I am not leaving you here." "You are not leaving me," Walter said. "You are carrying the message forward." Another deep groan moved through the boat. Robert looked toward the passageway and then back at Walter. "My boy turned 1 last week." Walter knew about Daniel. Every man aboard knew about the photographs Robert kept wrapped in plastic inside his locker. A round-faced child holding the edge of a kitchen table. A young wife standing on a porch in Connecticut. Walter shifted his weight against the lever. "Then go make sure he turns too." Robert's face tightened. "Hold until positive assent." "I know my watch." Robert stepped through the hatch. The bulkhead closed between them with a heavy metallic strike. Walter was alone. The red lights flickered. The pressure gauge shook. Walter wrapped a maintenance strap around the lever and across his shoulder, using the weight of his body to keep the reserve air flowing. The damaged mechanism fought him with every vibration of the boat. Water climbed above his boots. Reports reached him faintly through the steel. Reserve tanks responding. Angle improving. Depth decreasing. Then the lights went out. Darkness filled the compartment. Walter continued holding the lever by touch. He did not think about how much ocean rested above the hull. He thought about the men forward of the sealed door. He thought about Robert Whitmore's son gripping the edge of a kitchen table. He thought about the promise every submariner made without speaking it aloud. Once the hatches closed, no man's life belonged only to himself. The lever pulled harder. Feeling disappeared from Walter's fingers. The strap cut through his work shirt and into his shoulder. He lowered his head and held on. The Hawthorne's bow began to rise. Forward, the depth needle finally moved towards safety. The control room called the aft compartment. Walter did not answer. The internal circuit had failed. When the Hawthorne broke the surface, the captain ordered an emergency count. 30 men answered. Walter Mercer did not. The official log listed him as presumed lost behind the sealed bulkhead. Robert refused to accept it. He waited for pressure to equalize, then returned aft with 2 sailors. When they opened the hatch, cold water spilled into the passageway. They found Walter on the deck beside the cabinet. The strap was still looped around his shoulder. The lever remained secured. The brass key was still in the lock. Walter's skin was cold. His breathing was so faint that Robert had to place 2 fingers beneath his nose to find it. For 17 minutes, the Hawthorne had carried 30 living men and 1 man the Navy believed was dead. Then Walter opened his eyes. The investigation that followed reduced the event to mechanical language. Electrical casualty. Loss of depth control. Emergency ballast actuation. Successful recovery. The report praised the crew as a unit. Several pages remained restricted. Walter's name appeared only in maintenance notes and witness statements that never entered the public history. The survivors knew better. When the Hawthorne was decommissioned, they removed the key from the control cabinet. They wanted it placed in a heritage case, but Walter refused. "Not yet," he had said. One by one, the men agreed. Walter would keep it until the last Hawthorne sailor saved that day had completed his final watch. Then the key would return. Robert Whitmore lived longer than the rest. He raised Daniel. He watched him enter the Naval Academy, earn his dolphins, and take command of a submarine. 3 days before Walter arrived at Checkpoint 2, Robert died in his sleep. The last man had come home. Morning returned to the pier. The key rested between Walter and Lieutenant Reed. Collins was already reaching for another telephone. Reed found his voice. "Who are you calling?" "Master Chief Grant. Security is already on the way." Collins met Reed's eyes. "Then we need someone here before they arrive." It was the first time Reed had heard resistance in the young sailor's voice. Collins placed the call. Master Chief, this is Seaman Collins at Checkpoint 2. There is a man here named Walter Mercer. He has a brass key marked Hawthorne, aft control. Silence answered. Collins looked at Walter. When Master Chief Samuel Grant spoke, every trace of routine had left his voice. Do not let anyone remove him from that pier. Collins lowered the receiver. Reed had heard enough. What did he say? He said Mr. Mercer stays here. Master Chief Grant does not command this checkpoint. No, Lieutenant. Collins looked toward the submarine. But he knows the man who does. Less than a minute later, Grant appeared at the forward bow. He was a career submariner with silver hair, precise movements, and the kind of presence that quieted junior sailors before he spoke. He crossed the pier without breaking stride. His eyes went first to Walter, then to the key. Grant stopped at the table. May I see the marking? Walter turned the key toward him. Grant read the words. The color left his face. He looked at the scar on Walter's hand. Walter Mercer. It was not a question. Grant removed his cover. Reed's posture changed. Grant did not salute. Walter was a civilian now, uncovered and out of uniform. Instead, the Master Chief stood bareheaded in the cold and offered the respect of one submariner to another. My father taught at the Learning Center, Grant said. He used to stop at the empty Hawthorne case every morning. Walter nodded. A lot of men stopped there. Grant looked toward Reed. Engineering just found a delayed contact on the port auxiliary pressure switch. They are replacing it now. Reed said nothing. Walter looked at the Resolute. She told you before the panel did. Grant almost smiled. Then he lifted the key carefully by its edges. Stay with him, he told Collins. Grant turned toward the submarine. Where are you going? Reed asked. To tell Captain Whitmore why his boat is still at the pier. Captain Daniel Whitmore stood at the head of the wardroom table reviewing the final deployment schedule when Master Chief Grant entered without knocking. A chart of the North Atlantic glowed on the wall. Coffee cooled in paper cups. Every department head was present. Whitmore looked up, ready to challenge the interruption, until he saw Grant's face. Captain, Grant said, Walter Mercer is standing at Checkpoint 2. The name struck Whitmore with the force of memory. His father had spoken it at birthdays, holidays, and quiet Sunday evenings when the old submariner allowed himself to revisit the Hawthorne. Walter stayed behind. Walter held the lever. Walter gave us daylight. Grant placed a photograph from the Heritage Archive on the table. It showed the Hawthorne crest above an empty glass case. Beneath it was the engraved promise. Returned when the last man comes home. He brought the key, Grant said. Whitmore stared at the image. On the wall of his childhood home, Robert Whitmore had kept a pencil drawing of that same key. Beneath the drawing, he had written 5 words. The reason you are here. My father died 3 days ago, Whitmore said. Yes, Captain. I asked the Heritage Foundation to locate Mercer. I told them to bring him directly to me. The appointment was filed under your father's estate. It never reached the deployment manifest. Whitmore closed the folder in front of him. Where is he? Checkpoint 2. Security was called. Every officer at the table stopped moving. Whitmore stood. Suspend the briefing. The operations officer began to speak. Captain, the certification window will remain open for another hour. Whitmore took his cover from the chair. My father waited 57 years for this meeting. The Navy can wait 60 minutes. He left the wardroom. The officers followed. Captain Whitmore crossed the pier with Master Chief Grant beside him. Sailors paused near cargo carts. A chief stopped halfway down the bow. Word had already begun moving through the boat, though no one yet understood the full reason. At Checkpoint 2, Reed straightened. Captain, I can explain. Whitmore did not look at him. His eyes remained on Walter. The old man stood beside the table with one hand near the oilcloth. The wind pressed his faded coat against his narrow frame. Whitmore stopped several feet away. For a moment, neither man spoke. Whitmore saw the age in Walter's face, but he also saw something familiar around the eyes. The same patience his father had carried. The same way of looking at machinery as though it were speaking in a language other men had forgotten. Whitmore removed his cover. Mr. Mercer, he said, my father waited his whole life to return that key with you. Walter studied his face. Time had changed the jaw and added gray to the hair, but Robert remained in his son's eyes. He kept his watch, Walter said. I came to finish mine. Whitmore swallowed. My father told me that I had birthdays because you stayed behind that door. Walter looked toward the water. Your father did his job. He said you gave him the years to do it. Walter did not answer. Whitmore looked down at the key. May I? Walter unfolded the oilcloth. It belongs to the boat. Whitmore lifted the key with both hands. Rust marked his palms. Reed watched the captain hold the object he had nearly dropped into a disposal bin. Whitmore turned to him. Cancel the security response. Yes, Captain. Then notify every department. Bring the crew topside. Reed hesitated. The entire crew, every sailor aboard this boat, should know why the Hawthorne case has been empty. Yes, Captain. Reed reached for the telephone. His fingers were no longer steady. Whitmore turned to Collins. Bring the heritage case from the wardroom. Yes, Captain. And tell Supply not to polish the key. Walter spoke before Collins could move. Leave the rust. Whitmore looked at him. Walter touched one dark mark near the key's teeth. That is the part that remembers. The crew of the USS Resolute formed along the pier beneath the pale morning sky. More than 100 sailors stood in 2 ranks beside the submarine. They had been pulled from final checks, engineering spaces, inventory stations, and deployment briefings. No band played. No cameras had been called. The only sounds were gulls, mooring lines, and boots settling against concrete. Walter stood near the center of the open space. Captain Whitmore held the key. Lieutenant Reed remained beside the checkpoint, replaying every word he had spoken. Scrap. Invalid. Not in the system. Leave. Each word now carried a different weight. Whitmore faced the crew. Most of you know the Hawthorne name from our heritage display, he said. You know that one place in the case has remained empty for more than 50 years. He raised the key. In 1969, USS Hawthorne lost main power during a deep-water exercise in the North Atlantic. Her ballast controls failed. 31 men were trapped aboard a submarine that could not stop descending. No one moved. A machinist's mate named Walter Mercer opened the manual reserve air cabinet with this key. When the mechanism failed to hold, he remained behind a sealed bulkhead and kept the system engaged with his own body until the boat reached the surface. Sailors turned their eyes toward Walter. For 17 minutes, he was listed as presumed lost. He survived. Every man forward of that hatch survived with him. Whitmore paused. One of those men was Chief Robert Whitmore, my father. The silence changed. It was no longer curiosity. It was understanding. My father lived long enough to raise his family, meet his grandchildren, and watch his son take command of a United States submarine. He told me that every one of those years began in a dark compartment where Walter Mercer refused to release a lever. Whitmore looked at Walter. The official summary of the Hawthorne casualty does not adequately identify what this man did. Today, I am forwarding the surviving witness statements and the original key to Naval History and Heritage Command with a formal request that Walter Mercer's action be restored to the permanent account. Master Chief Grant brought the glass case forward. The old brass plate remained beneath the empty mounting brackets. Whitmore placed the key inside without removing a single mark. Collins handed him a temporary nameplate prepared by the boat's engraving shop. Machinist's mate second-class Walter Elias Mercer. He held until they rose. Whitmore fixed the plate beneath the key. Walter touched 2 fingers to the glass. It belongs to the boat now, he said. Whitmore replaced his cover. Then he faced the ranks. Resolute, attention. Boots struck the pier in one rolling sound. Hand salute. Captain Whitmore raised his hand. Master Chief Grant followed. Then every covered sailor on the pier rendered the same salute. Walter stood beneath the black hull, smaller than every man around him and heavier in that moment than the submarine itself. His right hand trembled when he lifted it. Only slightly. He returned the salute. No one looked away. When the command ended, Reed stepped forward. Mr. Mercer. Walter turned. Reed removed his cover. I had a duty to protect this pier, he said. But I used that duty as permission not to listen. I treated you and that key without respect. There is no procedure that excuses that. Walter studied him. Keep the procedure, Lieutenant. Reed waited. Lose the contempt. Yes, sir. This time, Walter did not correct him. An engineering chief approached from the brow. Captain, the auxiliary pressure contact has been replaced. The pump is holding steady. Whitmore looked at Walter. The old man listened. The pump started once. Its vibration traveled through the pier, deep and even. Then it stopped and remained quiet. Walter nodded. She is breathing properly now. A few sailors smiled. Walter closed the empty oilcloth and placed it inside his coat. Captain Whitmore walked with him toward the end of the pier. Behind them, the rusted key remained inside the glass case, carrying the marks of salt, darkness, and 57 years of waiting. Before dawn the next morning, USS Resolute left Virginia. Her systems were sound. Her crew knew Walter Mercer's name. And for the first time since the Hawthorne surfaced, the man who had brought 31 sailors home was no longer missing from the story. Some keys open steel doors. Others open the memory of a nation that has forgotten whom it owes. This one brought 31 men home twice.